Welcome to the G360 Wealth Podcast. Today we're in the generational planning series, and I am excited and privileged and humbled to be joined by Kurt Steinkrauss. Today's our Super Bowl of episodes. As many of our listeners know, we are a planning-based firm, and we are here with one of the authorities of all things planning, corporate and personal. Kurt is a partner at Mintz-Levin. He is the chair of the closely held business practice and co-chair of the private equity practice. Amongst other things, Kurt is a fantastic person. He's empathetic, and he's one of the most trusted advisors to the nation's most successful entrepreneurs and executives, and a trusted advisor. Kurt, thank you for being here. Did I get your title right? There's a lot of things you do.
Thanks, Sam. Appreciate it. Great to be here. Yeah, that sounds good to me. Certainly, trusted advisor is probably the thing that means the most, to be honest. Helping clients is really what I love doing.
Well, I want to make the most of our time today, Kurt. And last night I was thinking about how do I broach the conversation with Kurt? We could talk about valuation discounts, QSBS, slats, grats, NICRUTs. We can go into the acronyms. And you do so many things, and you do so many things so well, and you're surrounded by a team of experts and subject matter experts. I was doing some research on you on the World Wide Web, and I wanted to take us back. I want to take us back all the way to 1998, I think. You're a freshly minted JD at Suffolk Law School. What's ahead for Kurt? Where do you go from walking across that stage?
Wow, that's a great question. I'll take it even further back, Sam, actually, because I'd go back to age 8 when I declared to my dad that I wanted to be a lawyer like him, and he had his own law practice, and so my aunt was with me at the time and said, "Oh, it's going to be Steinkrauss and father," and I said, "No, it's going to be Steinkrauss and son." So we always had a plan to be a lawyer since age 8, and always wanted to do what my dad does, really. So when I went to law school, I had every intention of joining my dad's firm. It was a suburban firm. I grew up working there, worked there in law school. But in the fall of '97, I actually decided I wanted to work somewhere else, work at a bigger firm, go out into the city and get some real city life experience. So in 1998, I was on my way to Arthur Andersen. I made the decision to start my legal career at an accounting firm, of all things. But I had a unique path there. I was an accounting major at Boston College. I worked at the IRS in the estate and gift tax division when I was in law school. So I had a passion for tax, and I knew I wanted to be a corporate tax and trust and estates lawyer. And to do that really well, one, you need a really heavy tax background, a big, heavy accounting background. And you have windows in life where you can get experiences. And I decided that if I didn't get that big accounting experience early in my career, I never would get it later. So I made the decision to actually start in an accounting firm as a lawyer. And I'm very grateful that I did. I learned a ton at Andersen. I was there for over 2 years, got a chance to work with some incredible people, but got to work on transactions, work with high net worth individuals, really, did sales, but, really absorbed everything. Training was utmost importance to Andersen. They send us to Chicago, every year for a couple of weeks. We're literally in school all day, going to classes, learning. I was a sponge, getting as much information as I possibly could.
Well, what we'll cover later when we get more through your career and experience and client work is I love how you've been on the other side of a lot of transactions. You've worked for the IRS. Now, arguably you're kind of on the other side of navigating the IRS. You've represented buy side and sell side. So, you throughout your career, you've almost got to see the other team's playbook, which I think, is a credit. And in your role, experience, I would say absolutely matters. Yeah. So walk me through on a day-to-day basis, is every Monday the same for Kurt and your team at Mintz when you wake up?
I wish. But then again, if it was, it'd be boring, right? I say it all the time. And we're fortunate. We get to work with a lot of great clients, clients that become friends, clients that we spend a lot of time with, lifelong clients. I've got clients that when I joined Mintz actually in 2000. So when I was in Anderson. I missed practice in law. I could tell people what to do at Anderson, but I couldn't do it. And I missed being able to tell people what to do and actually do it. So I, interviewed at a bunch of different firms and really fell in love with Mintz, for a lot of reasons. One, it's a very entrepreneurial firm. Two, it will allow me to be a corporate and trust and estates lawyer. Three, we don't serve as trustee and manage money. So I didn't want that conflict. I didn't want to be distracted from, in Boston, a lot of trust and estates lawyers, serve as trustee and manage money. And, I just feel like, leave that to you and the experts. You're much better at managing money than I think lawyers probably are. And so I wanted a firm that would allow me to be entrepreneurial, allow me to do corporate work and trust and estates work. And that's, now 26 years later, that's certainly proved to be true. That every day is a box of chocolates, and you never know what you're going to get. And it's what makes it exciting. That clients can trust me and call me at all times, which is absolutely what I want. I give them my cell phone numbers. I don't try to hide from people. I want them to call me when they have an issue. And we get to work with people on really challenging things. Both from a trust and estate standpoint, end of life situations, been in hospice many times, been in people's hospital rooms, been there when clients have literally passed away, the day after I visited them. To be there towards their end of life is just an incredible amount of responsibility as well, that to make sure that their affairs are in order. And also to be there when they get over the finish line and selling their business. A lifetime of time building a business, and to be there to help them, reap the benefits of all that hard work, and to be able to kind of, reach the end of the marathon that they've been on is very rewarding.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of the great privileges in life. And one of the things I really admire about you, Kurt, is you focus on what you do. I know a lot of times I see wealth management firms doing tax and estate and investment management. And as a qualified wealth manager, you should know those. You should know these types of entities, but you can't be all things to all people all the time. And as they say, the jack of all trades is the ace of none.
Right.
So,
Right.
To our listeners out there, for folks who own small businesses, I want to kind of set the stage on what Kurt does and what Kurt does differently. It's amazing, American entrepreneurship, right? How many small businesses start off with their brother-in-law's friend who's a divorce attorney who's
Yeah.
representing the business for corporate and helped them with their estate plan that he kind of threw together for them. Could you walk me through on who you work with and what specifically you do for them, and how partnering with Mintz allows for kind of a robust offering?
Yeah, it's a great question. And certainly, I grew up a suburban lawyer, so I have a lot of respect for what people do, on the ground with small businesses and helping them grow their businesses. But we work with, middle market companies. It's widely defined, but our companies are, enterprise values is, startups to all the way to, hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars. But for our M&A transactions, they tend to be, on the low end of 20 million, up to 500 million. Sort of the bell curve, is probably that 30 to $300 million valuation businesses of really any and all industries. And that's another thing. I'm very fortunate. I get to work with, consumer companies and, like the paper store, and sneaker companies like Noble, and car dealerships and construction companies and manufacturing companies and food distribution companies and, Mama Rosie's. And, I'm just very, very fortunate to kind of live vicariously through so many different people and their businesses. But they're all walks of shape of life in terms of businesses. But the common denominator is, for me, they're privately held businesses. They're family owned, they're privately owned. They could be private equity backed. We have people that work with public companies, but I work with private companies, and I help them. A lot of it is help them sell their business. I'd say for a lot of businesses, the goal is to grow and sell. Some it's to grow and get it to the next generation, and we help them do that too. Some it's to grow and sell to their employees and do an ESOP, and we can help them with that as well. Majority of people, want to sell their business, kind of put some money in their pocket. And, that's really the starting point, Sam, is, what is the number you're trying to get to? And that's why I like working with you and your team of, you got to figure out with them, what is their number, right? How much are they trying to get to so they can live the lifestyle they want? And I'll flip the script on you and ask you, how do you figure out with your clients what that number is?
Well, it's a great point, and I think when I always think of that Voya commercial. I'm not sure if you've ever seen that with the ball. What's your number? What do you have to
Uh-huh.
get to?
Yep.
Retirement plans for our clients and the clients we work with are quite interesting because we're having a layer of a conversation that's a little more profound than what do you need. Most of our clients live in the world of excess. They're going to pass away, and they're not worried about are they going to be able to retire. They're worried about what their federal estate tax is going to be and how to navigate and plan around that. Not to digress, I think one of the things that we're learning and working with in our firm, the name of our firm is Generation Capital Advisors, and one of the things we do uniquely well is work with you and your team and our clients is to transfer wealth tax free. But I think one of the things that we also want to focus on is transferring values and experiences in life. So, you can probably see it just as well. I was thinking, I was at the gym this morning, my brain's almost going, and you know, there's probably a sense of boredom amongst your clients. We usually kind of receive them on the other end of the sale and manage their money.
Yeah.
But, when we work with clients, I think that what is your number? What is your worth? Once you exit the business, I think there's different challenges in life. And candidly, we work closely with a lot of family dynamics firms, family governance firms, because there's a whole wave of complexity that comes.
Mm.
Some clients will say, hey, what, if I have 50 million, that's what I need, or I need 75 million. And I always like to distill that down and say, well, why? Oh,
Mm.
okay. Well, you want to join, this country club and you want to be
Right.
able to travel private, but, why?
Mm.
And then what message does that signal to the next generation? And how do we empower them and train and coach them to say, okay, Kurt just sold his company for 50 million. How do you become a productive member of society and pave your own way? And there's a whole set of challenges that can come along with that, for the next generation, have fulfilling achievement, and making sure that they're engaged. So, I think that's a unique, I wouldn't say problem, but, it's definitely a complexity facing some of our families. And that's
Mm.
one thing that I really enjoy working on them with is, I always tell folks all the time, they're not going to put your Fidelity brokerage balance on your gravestone.
Yeah, that's a good point. No, and that's true about selling their businesses. I mean, certainly maximizing a number is rewarding, but the legacy, are the employees going to be still be there? Are they still going to be a big part of the community, sponsoring those local charities, being a good member of the community, supporting the local economy around that with other suppliers and vendors. And so that's important to my clients. But really helping them, once they've kind of made the decision to sell, I will guide them through that process of, do you hire an investment banker? Because a lot of people, their phones are ringing. They've already got people that have been calling them. And it's like, I always use the analogy of selling your business is like selling your house times 10. Except there is no Zillow for selling your home business, that value is very much in the eye of the beholder. Zillow is going to be pretty accurate, right? But businesses, I could tell you many stories of going to market and getting bids at, 40 million, 50 million, 60 million, 80 million. I mean, literally twice the values, and you hear it all the time. And so that's one of the benefits of hiring a banker, is that they run a process, right? They go to market, and that market doesn't have to be thousands of businesses, but it can go out to a dozen potential buyers, but one, there's somebody else doing it, not you, the entrepreneur, which is a tricky spot to be in. Two, they create the appearance of a more robust competition. It's not proprietary, so people are going to hopefully sharpen their pencils, and they help you kind of guide your way through the deal, which is important. So I'm a big proponent of hiring an investment banker or a business broker. Obviously, you want to find somebody that's got experience in your industry, sells companies in your size, they ultimately make a connection with. I just had a deal die yesterday, very late in the game. Doesn't happen very often, really, to be honest. And my client, she's amazing. And the first thing she said to me is, I feel really bad for the banker because that person worked really hard for her. And I said, first off, don't worry about us and him. And, you are our
It's going to be the first
priority.
person ever feeling bad for a
I
banker.
know, true, but it's just a testament to the way he treated her, and
Yep.
that she felt. That was the first thing she said to me when I said, "Oh, I heard about the news, and I'm really sorry." But she's optimistic, and hopefully, we'll go back to market and we'll get a better deal. But that banker really does, help, I think with the process. But before you go to market, there's a lot to be done. Like if I said to you, Sam, hey, can I do an open house this weekend on your house? You'd be like, heck no. I got to clean the garage. I got to fix this. I got to do that. I got a whole list of things I got to do. Well, selling your business is no different. You got to get your house in order. This is your time to make sure that, all of your contracts are in place, your leases are in place, your relationships with your key employees are in place, your trademarks, your insurance, all these things that honestly, you probably aren't 100% ready. And I tell everybody, you should always go through the exercise of selling your business. Nay, not the full process, but the preparation part. Everybody should do this. Everybody should run their business like it's for sale. Because if you do, it's going to be better run. You're going to be more organized. You're going to be more on top of it. You're going to be more protected. And I think when people go through this process, she said it to me yesterday. Wow, I learned so much about my business. I learned a lot about my vulnerabilities that, on how I my agreements with my employees, my leases with landlords, things that you don't really think too much about until you're going to sell your business. So that's something we've spent a lot of time on. But even before that, spending time with you and your team on, do you want to do some tax planning, estate planning? You talk about generational wealth that, yes, most people are going to sell their businesses probably more than what you're allowed to give away, under the federal estate tax laws. Right now, it's very high at $15 million per person, $30 million per couple. So the first 30 million can go to your kids, grandkids without taxes. After that, you're paying 40% federally and probably another 10% for state estate taxes. So you're talking 50% of your wealth, over $30 million is going to go to the government. So now, before you go to market, is the best time to think about giving away shares of your business.
I think that's an excellent point and a great parlay into, let's talk about when people come to you. And for full disclosure of our clients, I'm a customer and our firm is a customer of Mintz and Kurt. We're not planning on selling the business, but what we have done with you, and I think it's been great to share stories with other folks, is kind of that cleanup process, right? Yeah. And for all the entrepreneurs out this coming, can relate to this. Generation Capital Advisors, just like your restaurant or your food distributor or your paper company, it started as an idea in my head in an office somewhere, and then it came to life. And as these businesses come to life, you're throwing things together. You're not worried about your corporate documents. You're worried about keeping the lights on. A couple of years ago, I wasn't worried about managing hundreds of millions of dollars. I was worried that my computer was going to shut off because I couldn't pay the bill for it. Yeah. And now, as our business has matured, what I have really taken, a lot of pride in is working with a firm like yours, is I know we're buttoned up. We've got cyber governance. We've got our contracts looked out. We do business in almost all 50 states. We have headquarters in Boston and Florida. From education of a lot of your team, we needed to make sure that we were up to code and up to speed and future proof. So one of the things that I want to ask you is, I can't imagine that you've ever had a customer that came to you with everything in perfect order. So what's that process look like? When I come to Kurt, I imagine there's going to be a little bit of a document request gathering. Some of your clients, unlike us, we're young, modern, and digital. They might not have everything digitized. What's that process
like? Oh my gosh, it could be tough. Yeah, no, it can be literally boxes of documents that haven't even been scanned in yet. And that is absolutely happens. Or people are very disorganized, and we've uncovered a lot of issues. Thankfully ahead of the game. For example, there are a lot of S corporations, S's and Sam. It's a flow through. It's like a partnership, but it's actually a corporation, right? It's an Inc. But you make this election to be treated as a flow through entity, so it's very favorable. You don't have that double taxation like you have in a C corporation. So a lot of small businesses are S corporations because they're very favorable in that respect. But you can inadvertently blow your S election because only certain individuals, certain trusts, can be shareholders of S corporations. You can't have a second class of stock. You can have voting and non-voting. You can have separate economic rights. So if you inadvertently, gave an investor a preferred shares of an S corporation, that's going to blow
Yep.
your S election. If you had given shares to a trust and that trust wasn't a qualified S corp shareholder, that's going to blow your S election. And what that means is that you're now back to a C corp, and C corps are double taxation, right? You pay taxes at the corporate level, and you pay. So a lot of it is really starting at the very core, fundamental. What type of entity are you? Are you a corporation? Are you an LLC? Are you a C corp? Are you an S corp? That matters a lot. And now you might be hearing a lot about this qualified small business stock, Section 1202. This is where I've got a positive story, where I talk to people and I say, wow, you're a C corp. And people, yeah, I never, I regret doing that. And I said, hold on, time out. You may be actually really happy because, the government is in these certain situations where you have qualified small business stock. You are a startup, you issued shares from your company. When you were a C corp, the value of the company asset wise was under 50 million at the time. Now it's 75 million. And these aren't for only certain companies. You have to be making something, technology or life science companies or manufacturing companies. It can't be professional services companies like ours don't qualify for this. But if you make something and you're a C corp, when you go to sell your company, you can exclude the greater of 10 times your basis or $10 million prior to this most recent tax act, or even up to $15 million per taxpayer. So we've been in a situation where, hey, time out. Don't switch to an S corp because they were about to do that. Stay a C corp because you've got all these favorable tax benefits when you sell the business.
How excited do you get when that conversation is happening and you're about to tell somebody you're going to save them 10, $15 million
It's a
in
great
taxes?
feeling because that's a real life, thing. Like that's going to save them taxes today. Like you and I do a lot of that generational wealth planning, and that's super important, right? The best return on investment a client will ever get is doing good tax and estate planning, because you're talking again about 50% of your estate potentially going to the federal and state government when you die. So that return on investment of getting a dollar out of your estate today is saving your kids and grandkids 50 cents on the dollar. But that's a long time from now, right? And so that benefit, first off, you personally won't see that benefit. I don't know what the afterlife looks like. And maybe people are looking down being like, hey, nice job. But until then, we know that the kids and grandkids will appreciate it. And kind of going back to that for a second, when clients come to me and say, I'm thinking about selling, that is probably the first thing I think about is, hey, we should think about giving away some of the shares today. Because even if you said to me, Sam, I think this client's going to sell at 100 million. Okay. Today, I could probably get a valuation for 70 million or 80 million, because 100 million is this enterprise value, best buyer comes forward, gets me 100 million. But a valuation of the company could be 70 million. I could get a third party valuation probably to justify that. Then when I give away pieces of the company, I'm giving away minority interests, lack of control, lack of marketability. I could take up to another 40% discount off that. So now suddenly that $100 million number goes down to 70 million, goes down to 50 million, maybe even 42 million. So now you're giving away shares of the company at 50, 60% less than what you hope you'll sell for in the near future. That opportunity does not happen very often. I hope it does for a lot of people, but for most people, they're probably going to have one big exit in their life. And this window of opportunity will close, right? Because the further along you get in the deal, the harder it is for me to be able to say those shares are worth a lot less than 100 million, right? So this window of opportunity will close on you. And a lot of people come to me on the back end and say, hey, I'm about to, I'm about to sell my company. I need help. And I say, well, we're probably not able to do much in terms of gifting. Or I did sell my company and I want to do some more planning. And it's not that we can't help them, but, we've lost a big opportunity.
Yeah, I think that brings up a point that I want to be pretty candid about, Kurt, is that I think a lot of small business owners got to where they are by, really grinding it out, managing the finances really tightly. And candidly, they see a big law firm, they might get a little intimidated
Yeah.
and they're like, oh, I don't know if I want to call Kurt. I would encourage folks, and I maybe give you the floor to talk about this. You just gave two anecdotal examples of saving tens of millions of dollars. We come across business owners all the time, and we rarely see these plans in place, right? No one ever had the time to sit down and really think about this. You bring up an excellent point on timing really matters. There's no better time like the now. It's New Year's. I was in the gym this morning. I have been going prior, but it was packed, right? Let's add this to the New Year's resolution. If you're listening to this and you're a small business owner, give your attorney a call. Give Kurt a call. We'll share his contact and information at the end. But having an introductory call, I think, is really important to learn about the process. But maybe I'll give you a point to speak about maybe clients being intimidated, and I can tell them from my experiences that no one's going to hit you or bite you.
Right.
It's an educational process, and no one's going to judge you. Whether you're, have scanned in or, you don't have your documents in order. This is standard operating procedure for you guys.
Absolutely. And I get it. We're, we're not the most expensive law firm, but we're certainly not the lowest. We're upper middle market. We blend out at maybe $1,200 an hour, which for a lot of people that is a big increase from where they've been paying. But, the best analogy is, the medical field, right? Day-to-day medical issues, you have your primary care physician out in the suburbs, and they'll do perfectly fine seeing you, checking up on things, giving you a prescription for pink eye or, some ailment. But, now you're talking about selling your business or potentially selling your business. That's open heart surgery, right? You got one shot to do it right. And you drive to Boston and you see experts and you see people that do this for a living, just like that open heart surgery. You go to experts that do this all the time. I've bought and sold over 200 companies. The experience is, that matters, right? I've been doing this for almost 30 years, as you talked about, 1998. So I'm getting up there. But I'm only 52. So I got plenty of gas in the tank. And, the plan is to, keep doing this for the next 20 years. But yeah, I want people to come to me, feel comfortable. I never charge them for the first call. I'll spend a lot of time with clients, hours with them before they ever get a bill from me. I want to give before I get. I want to be additive to them. And I will always spend time with anybody and give them real advice. I don't hide the ball. I don't say, well, if you hire me, I'll tell you what's the answer. I'll tell them like, hey,
let me take you through the Sandler selling pain funnel and,
Right. Yeah, exactly. That's not what we're doing. I tell people, fire away, you got me, and, we should talk. And like you said, you got to be open about it, but I want them to feel comfortable. I also encourage them to join, peer-to-peer groups, Vistage, YPO, there's a lot of other great groups like that in Boston, and that you can join and be with other CEOs and other business owners, where you can really learn. That peer-to-peer learning is really important. And so I encourage them to do that. I encourage them. I do a lot of seminars, and they can come for free, and they listen to me and others talk about selling their business. And so those are some of the ways to get the barriers to come down, to come in, talk, because there's no cost. There's other ways to learn from us. But ultimately, we want them to feel comfortable that, they can share this information, because it really is, at the end of the day, it's like going to see your doctor. If you're not being honest about your vulnerabilities and how you really feel, it's going to be hard for us to sometimes, solve some of the problems if we don't know about them. I can certainly identify a lot on my own by not having leases, not having trademarks, not having contracts, not having, your insurance. You mentioned this before, but one of the first questions I'll ask is, do you have cyber insurance? Like, no, I don't have people's social security numbers. I'm like, yeah, but you run a business that could be shut down, right, through cyber attacks. And, I got that call a few months ago on a Sunday morning. Hey, our system is down. We got a ransomware. We need help. And so immediately my team moved in, helped them, resolve the matter. I had another client recently got a wire fraud issue, and we had our FBI contacts helping them, within 5 hours, and literally was able, at the very last minute, was able to freeze the account because we knew where it went. And it was off to, overseas, probably within an hour, the bank said, if we didn't catch it, then, that's someone being vulnerable, right? Saying, look, I need help. I got this problem. So that's something that we spent a lot of time, trying to overcome we're not the big, bad, scary law firm. Everybody, I'm a son of a lawyer, so I've been hearing lawyer jokes my entire life. And so I'm used to it. And I get it. We get paid by the hour. And I know that's a very, can be, an intimidating thing, but at the same time, we're very transparent. You know exactly what you're getting. There's no, we tell you what we do, and, you get to see it, and we always talk about it too. I mean, that's the other thing. I spend time with clients. Like, I'm never going to do something without telling you what I think it's going to cost. I always provide budgets, try to give them estimates. Of course, there's somebody on the other side of these transactions, so I can't always predict how bad the other side's going to be, how difficult they're going to be, how long they're going to, I just had a big strategic spend 6 months diligencing question. Those are things that are, out of my control. But, I can tell them that, hey, on average, a size of your size company in your industry for this type of buyer, it's usually in this range. And we're usually within that range is, 90% of the time. So it's a good feeling when you do enough deals, you kind of get a good feel for it.
Yeah, and I always say, cost is only an issue in the absence of value.
Yep,
And
that's right.
I think one of the things that, I personally value about working with you, and I think a lot of our business owner clients and folks in our community and in New England will value about working with you, and I'll let you speak to, is having a deep bench. One of the things I learned from this process is that there's a specialist for everything. In our case, it's having an expert in SEC law, right? You can't just write a contract. You have to make sure that it integrates with the SEC code, or perhaps business, when we're doing business in other states. If you're in the restaurant industry, you might be having to deal with liquor licenses. Everybody's got a regulator. So I think having that resource to integrate, it's like, oh, I have the best contract lawyer in the world,
Right.
but I didn't realize that it wasn't up to snuff with my regulator.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. That's honestly why I decided not to work for my dad. I realized that he was the jack of all trades and master of some. And, I realized that they needed to be around a lot of really smart people. And I am only as good as the people around me. I'm very fortunate to work with great colleagues, tax lawyers, ERISA lawyers, employment lawyers, real estate lawyers, contract lawyers, privacy, data security, financial securities, SEC lawyers. And I'm like the Verizon commercial. There's me and 500, actually it's 600 plus people behind me now, lawyers at Mintz. We're at 650 or so lawyers. And it's me, and they're all right behind me, especially me being here for 26 years, working with dozens and dozens of companies every year. I'm very fortunate that I have a very good pulse on who to call within Mintz. We have a great culture. Everybody always wants to help. But you're right. I mean, there's a lot of great lawyers out there, and there's, I'm not going to say I'm the best corporate lawyer, the best M&A lawyer. I think I'm very good. But what really differentiates, I think, is the team around us. That are all focused on working with middle market companies and, helping them, kind of see what they can't see, right? That's our job, is to see the blind spots and get ahead of things. And, when I go to sell a company, the promise is I got to help them get a top of market price, top of market terms, and protect them on the back end. Because if you don't protect them on the back end, 1 and 2 don't matter, right? If the buyer can take back as much money as they want from the seller, because the indemnities, remember, when you go to sell your company, you put your hand on the Bible. I promise that all these things are true and accurate, right? My receivables, my payables, my assets, my liabilities, my contracts, I'm making all these promises. And if any of those end up not being true, even if it's not fraud, you could be responsible to give back money, right? And that's the last thing you want to do. And so these agreements, believe it or not, Sam, they're 80 pages, 90 pages long. Do they need to be that long? Of course not. Lawyers have caused them to be that long because, things can't be done with, hey, I'm going to buy your company for $100 million. I write you a check for $100 million. You give me the stock of the company and we're all good. And that's probably what it was 50 years ago. And then suddenly someone said, hey, I just paid $100 million for a business that the customers went out the door the second I bought it. There were all these lawsuits waiting for me, all these liabilities waiting for me, and said, we should probably protect these people. And so that protection kept growing and growing and growing. But believe it or not, all those words matter in that agreement. Materiality. Is it material? Is it negligence or gross negligence? Like, it matters. It's not, a few good men, grave danger. Is there another kind, but there are other kinds of knowledge qualifiers, and that matters. If you say, to the best of my knowledge, I don't have any pending liabilities, that's much better than I affirmatively say there are no doubt, I will stand by this no matter what. That's hard to, how could you ever do that? You run a big business, like at any given moment, a lawsuit could be being drafted against a client as we speak. They don't even know about it. But if it comes in the next day, the buyer's immediately going to say, you should have known, or you got the letter. There were better letters going back and forth or emails. So, really is imperative that you protect them on the back end and make sure that, and then fortunately, Sam, there's been a new thing called reps and warranty insurance. And, and again, it used to be that you would escrow 10 to 20% of your purchase price. You could sell your company for $100 million. 10 or $20 million of your money would sit in a separate account for 12 to 24 months in case any of those promises turn out to be untrue. That is a very unsettling thing, right? To have that much of a seller's money sitting in an account, waiting basically for something bad to happen. And so thankfully, the insurance industry realized that they could insure that risk, and of course, there's a premium associated with that, but it's not nearly as high as you think it is. And now it's become very standard that we get what's called reps and warranty insurance on these deals.
Yeah, and I think a lot of folks don't think about that. Like, I'm just going to sell my company. I'm going to be, done with it. You made a comment to me when we spoke last of, you sell your car. You don't think that the buyer's going to come back and sue you because the rim came off.
Even your house, you walk away from it, and it's very rare that anyone ever comes back. But in businesses, it absolutely, hate to say it, I mean, it's thankfully we don't get in too many fights on the back end, I will say, but that goes to, I think, the way we draft our documents, the way we approach things, that we cut off things before they become problems, and that's what you never know, right? I had somebody come to me on the back end of, they didn't use me to sell their company. They wanted me to help them with a back end problem. And of course, I started looking at the agreement, and it had all these issues about the indemnities and the risks and those promises that were too broad. And, and now here they are saying, help me fight these claims off. Well, I'm kind of doing it with one hand tied behind my back because the agreement just wasn't drafted as well as it could have been. And that's hard because, like, the average person, how would they ever know the difference between my document and somebody else's document? It's not,
it's no chance.
It's no chance, just like I wouldn't know the difference between, different engines or, different rings or jewelry or diamonds. Like, there's experts for all these things. And we rely on experts to help us with these things.
Yeah. And that brings me to, as you kind of broach our kind of a couple points, there's something I really want to hone in on is teamwork. How important is it that when somebody's going through a process, like if a client says, I'm thinking about selling my business, to me, like, alarm bells are going off. Let's get your CPA, let's get Kurt, let's get me, let's get everybody on your team, at least in a meeting once, bare minimum once a year. We rarely see prospective clients that are like, my CPA doesn't even know my attorney's name, right?
Yeah.
How important is it having a team integrated in this process?
That's so critical. And those are the best clients, the ones where the financial advisor, me, the lawyer, the accountant are meeting regularly with the clients, getting ahead of things, talking about things, so that when we do go to sell, we're not strangers to each other. And we've already been thinking about things. We've been doing gifting for years. We're not waiting even for this moment to do it. We've already done the gifting when the value was even a lot less. I mean, I made a gift a couple of years ago. And the shares were worth $1 million, in the gift, and we ended up selling them for $10 million, just for those shares alone, and what a great return on investment, moving $9 million out of their estate, saved them $4.5 million plus all the appreciation. But that teamwork is critical. I mean, having a good CPA, and look, there's a lot of great, and that's my background, right? I was an accounting major, worked at, the IRS, worked at Arthur Andersen. I have a master's in tax as well that I went and got at night, after law school. And so I'm highly sensitive to good CPA advice, and it's not my job to try to displace people, but, look, just like sometimes they have lawyers that, are great at what they do for what they need to be doing. That happens in the CPA world as well. Maybe that CPA is really perfectly fine for handling your tax return, but has never sold a company before and has never done a stock versus asset analysis, which is the ultimate thing that we really need the accountants from, because there's this tug of war happening between buyers and sellers, right? Sellers want to sell stock to get long-term capital gains treatment and minimize any taxes. Buyers want to buy assets, right? They want to limit liabilities and they want to get a step up in basis. It's very important to be able to re-depreciate and re-amortize all the things they're buying. If you buy stock, you can't amortize or depreciate, stock. You just have basis until you sell. And so there's that tug of war. And so what buyers do is they say, all right, look, I'm going to buy your stock, Sam, but we're going to make this election, this 338H10 election for S Corps, to treat that deal as an asset deal for tax purposes. And what that means is now the company is deemed to be selling its assets. And if you have a lot of depreciation because you're a manufacturing company, you have depreciation recapture, which is a much higher tax than capital gains. And if you're in Massachusetts and you're an S Corp, you have that sting tax, right? That additional 3% tax. So I've done this dozens and dozens and dozens of times where the buyers say, we want to step up in basis. And I say, well, okay, but that's going to cost my client $9 million more in taxes. All the depreciation recapture, the mass sting tax. Who's going to pay for this? And if you don't have a good lawyer and a good team around you, a good financial advisor, a good CPA that's recognizing that, hey, time out, you got to gross me up. It's not even the gross. You got to gross up on the gross up. I got to be net, right? Don't just give me, oh, it's $9 million more. Here's $9 million. Well, guess I have to pay taxes on $9 million. So it's circular, right? You got to give me, 14 million to end up at 9 million. And
Yeah.
And
the math isn't mathing.
No, exactly. And it's like, that is something I cannot tell you, Sam, how often that gets missed. That gross up of come in on the back end sometimes on deals, and I said, wow, you're paying all these extra taxes. The buyers get this huge benefit. Now they get to redepreciate all that equipment. They get to amortize the goodwill over 15 years. Huge benefit. And we spent a lot of time negotiating that, but we need a good CPA that can run the numbers. Like, I don't have the numbers. I don't have the depreciation. You don't want to, that's where you don't want to pay me, my rate to do that analysis. That's where we really lean on the accountants.
And there's so many things that can happen on the back end. We're kind of talking about team, like even bigger sales. Like, the last thing you want your CPA is be like, what's 280G?
Oh yes, the golden parachute. Yeah, that's a big one. Yeah, I often will ask them, like, how many 338H10 elections have you done? If they say not many, then we probably don't have the right accountant, because it really is. I mean, and I'm surprised I'm 40 minutes into this and have not said my thing I say all the time. When you sell your business, time is the enemy of all deals. Only bad things can happen to sellers when they go to market. Like, you go to market, you kind of snap a picture of your financials, where the company's going, the employees, the customers, right? You pick up a good customer, they're not going to pay necessarily more for you, maybe a little bit, probably not. But you lose a big customer, they'll pay less. You settle a lawsuit, they're not going to pay more. You get hit with a lawsuit, they're going to pay less. It's a one-way ratchet. And, that is the thing we're always running against, is time. Once you decide you want to sell, we got to run hard, because it inevitably things will happen. So I sold the company a few years ago. Right after we closed, we got hit with the Department of Labor audit, literally the next week. DOL audit. We're a company that manufactures things. Deal would have died, right? Another deal, our largest customer went through a change of control, provision. They sold. Definitely would have killed our deal. Had an IRS audit that came in after the deal. So, and then sadly, there have been things that didn't happen before deals, get died. With Medicare audits that came in out of nowhere. A fire that could happen in a building. There's just so many things that are in your control, out of your control. But I can tell you this: generally speaking, it's not a good thing that the deal takes longer. There have been the rare exception when I just went through this where the client's revenue just was a rocket ship. And because it caught this wave, we were able to reset the deal and get a little bit more price out of it and a little more value out of it. But 9 out of 10 times, it's only going to hurt you. And that's why, go back to my team, we sign up for this, Sam. We signed up for nights and weekends, and when I sold over the summer, I sold a company in New Hampshire, and my colleagues and I worked all day July 3rd, all day July 4th. Were we happy about that? Of course not. Were our families happy about that? Of course not. I'd go on a call, run out, have a hot dog, go back and be on a call, and it was over by 6, thankfully. But it was tough, but we did it because we had to, and and that's what we can move quickly. When sometimes you have a smaller firm, they don't have the resources, they don't have the team that can work nights and weekends to get a deal done.
I can say there is one thing for certain that I can say about you and your team. You guys work very, very, very hard.
Yeah.
Emails come in at any time.
Yeah.
And I think, as we wrap up, I one of my favorite shows as a kid was Around the Horn. So, at the end, you got a chance to kind of get, the floor is yours. So,
yeah,
Kurt, I'll give you kind of the last word, for our listeners out there. First of all, please tell us how to get a hold of you. Obviously, you can reach out to me. I can make an introduction. Like Kurt said, any introductory calls are free of charge, if you just want to learn more about the practice. But I'll let you close it out, Kurt.
Well, I appreciate it. Yeah, and I think the last thing that I didn't get a chance to talk about was our private equity practice that I'm proud of. I started with my colleagues, over 18 years ago, built the private equity practice at Mintz, where we now represent over 24 private equity funds across the country. And that has been a huge advantage representing sellers, because now we legitimately have that experience representing great private equity funds when they buy companies. So we can anticipate a lot more. And for a lot of sellers, there's probably a 75% chance you sell to a private equity fund, either directly or indirectly. And so that's been when I started the practice, I didn't realize how beneficial it would be to my sell side practice, but that has been enormously important and enormously valuable. And the team that works on the private equity deals, the specialists, all work on these sell side deals to private equity funds. So I'm very proud of that, proud of the team, proud of being able to work with this great community in Boston, and people like you and Sam and your colleagues. And we're very fortunate to work in Boston, and but we help people across the country too. And really, you say we work hard, which we do, but I know it's an old adage, but when we love what you do, it's not work. And that is the case. I really do enjoy what I do. And, I don't feel bad when I'm, working at night, because I'm helping good people. And how to reach me, obviously go through you, Sam, or, I'm easy to find. Kurt Steinkrauss at Mintz-Levin, K Steinkrauss at Mintz.com. All my information's on the website as well at Mintz.com.
Well, Kurt, I think, we might have to sign you up for another episode, because it's hard to sum up 30 years of not only hard work, but helping families, across the country in a matter of an hour. But, I can safely say that I'm sure, as a client of yours and across the board, we're lucky to have you in our life. And I would encourage folks, if you're thinking about it, if you're kind of thinking, hey, I need to clean up my business, I haven't had anybody look at my documents, just reach out. A second opinion is not going to hurt you. So with that, I want to thank you for being part of the show. I would encourage our clients to reach out and our friends and listeners to reach out. And I'm wishing everybody a prosperous 2026.
Thanks for listening to the G360 Wealth Podcast. If today's episode gave you something to think about or act on, share it with someone who might need it. Don't forget to hit subscribe so you're always in the loop. If you want to learn more about how we help families like yours simplify and grow their wealth, visit us at generationcapitaladvisors.com. Until next time, take care and keep building. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guests and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of Generation Capital Advisors. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional investing advice. Always seek the advice of your financial advisor or other qualified financial service provider with any questions you may have regarding your investment planning. Investment advice offered through Integrated Partners, doing business as Generation Capital Advisors, a registered investment advisor. The information in this material is for general information only and is not intended to provide specific advice or recommendation for any individual. Integrated Partners does not provide legal, tax, or mortgage advice or services. Please consult your legal or tax advisor regarding your specific situation. All investing involves risk, including loss of principal. No strategy assures success or protects against loss.